Welcome to Pod Me If You Can. I'm David Farrell. Today on the show it is Chicago Cab, also known as Hellcab, stars John Cusack, Michael Ironside, Michael Shannon, Julianne Moore, Laurie Metcalf, Gillian Anderson, and many more.
Pardon Me If You Can, movie reviews.
A cab driver, Paul Dillon, on a typical shift in Chicago during Christmas that turns out to be not so typical on the longest day of the year. First of all, this film was marketed as Hellcab as well. If you saw Hellcab and you picked it up thinking it was a horror film, you were probably sorely mistaken, because this film is an independent film, executive produced by John Cusack and produced by the lead actor Paul Dillon, who I knew best as the Irish assassin in Austin Powers. Now, in a way, what you're getting here is kind of a portrait of loneliness, which is a little bit bleak. The cab driver doesn't really get a name. Most of the passengers don't get names. They're just drunk guy or distraught woman in the credits of IMDb. And besides loneliness, what it does highlight, I suppose, is a theme of racism in America, in Chicago in the 90s. Disagreements as to who people pick up in their cabs and how they behave. Breaking that kind of don't judge a book by its cover as well. And there's a real theme of men strong-arming women, overpowering women in the back of the cab, roughing them up. It seems that people in the back of taxis like to show their true colours, according to this independent film. Paul Dillon as the lead mutters to himself, hates his job, hates his life. He's talking to himself a lot and annoyed if anybody touches him, like pats him on the shoulder. Anytime somebody invites him inside, invites him to come for a drink, or on any adventure, he refuses, saying he has to work, which doesn't really further the adventures of the lead in this story. He's also not very relatable unless you yourself are isolated in a kind of taxi driver position. The film plays like a series of skits, where we get memorable and not so memorable cameos from people, and every passenger kind of gets less than 5 minutes of screen time. So it's mostly shot inside a cab, and with exterior shots of the streets and wherever he stops, but most of the film takes place in this isolated taxi. So you don't get a chance to really get to know any of the passengers for very long, and also your character of the taxi driver really needed a kind of a subplot, like a through line, to keep you interested. If he had a daughter who he was estranged from, and he was seeing that night for the first time, and they were going to have dinner, and he called her a couple of times from a payphone during the day, or you got a sense that he was going home to something, or there was some hope in his life. It didn't feel like it ended very hopefully, even if he got a decent fare by the end. It's based on a play called Hellcab, which apparently was very successful, from 1992 in Chicago. Michael Shannon really stole the cameo show for me. He was playing a coked up guy, and he's full of wired energy, and as you sort of get to know the stops he's making and wonder if he can afford to even take a taxi, I thought he really created a good sense of danger. Also, John Cusack's character basically plays the most creepy kind of, come on, take me down this alleyway kind of, fare that really there is a sense of danger to both of those characters. Michael Ironside played just another cabbie. Laurie Metcalf was in disguise, and this guy goes down on her in the back of the cab, and it's not so memorable. John C. Reilly gets to play kind of a dual character. He's playing this very affable, kind, flirty gentleman who's trying to get laid, and then when his girl gets out of the taxi, basically he shows his true colours to the taxi driver. Gillian Anderson gets to do some accent work as an annoyed girlfriend. But the best of the females was clearly Julianne Moore, who steps into the cab, looks distant, and she's credited as distraught woman, and she says, "I just got raped." Besides the terrible packaging, and it just annoys me, the faces of the people who are in this cab, none of them, really reflective of the kind of movie this is. It does have some very memorable cameos, but as an independent film, it doesn't really get beyond the taxi, sometimes you can feel how cheap it sort of is. It doesn't really wow you, and it is this portrait of loneliness, so it's a little bit bleak for me, and it was probably a better play than it is a film.
Thanks for watching. If you like what you see, please hit the subscribe button. Like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. Check out our podcast at www.podmeifyoucan.com.